At 4 months pregnant, my husband sent me straight to Sam's bed. Everyone knows that Sam is a tyrant. Mrs. C, I probably won't make it out alive this time. The maids gossiped in hushed whispers behind my back. But my husband acted as though he hadn't heard a word. He even brazenly brought his mistress into our home, looking at me with his cold, indifferent eyes. He said, "Don't blame me for being ruthless. That's the Sam we're talking about." With a flick of his finger. Neither you nor I could survive in Jingbei. Right in front of me, he promised his mistress a legitimate title. I didn't cry. I didn't fight back. I obediently got into Sam's car. Because in my past life, when I had tried to resist, when I had begged and threatened to die, my husband had allowed his pregnant mistress to take my place instead. But within half a month, that mistress had been tortured to death. My husband kept his rage hidden until the day I was discharged from the hospital. That day, he smothered our child with a blanket in front of me. I had tried desperately to stop him, but he had stabbed a knife right into my chest. He had, "This is what you owe, Bianca. But this time, I will make sure he and his mistress get exactly what they want." Chapter 1. Kevin sat across from me, holding a cigarette between his fingers. Without taking a drag, even through the swirling smoke, I could see the fleeting smirk that crossed his lips. The contract he had signed with Sam Lee in front of me, right next to the ultrasound report for my prenatal checkup, an especially cruel juxtaposition. I closed the contract and looked up at him, my voice unnervingly calm. "So you're planning to trade me for that multi-billion-dollar piece of land in West City?" Kevin stubbed out the cigarette in the crystal ashtray, his gaze lazy and indifferent. "Ruby, don't put it that way. The company needs that land. Without it, you know, the company is on the verge of bankruptcy." I stayed silent, my eyes drifting toward the ultrasound report. Then I asked the question I had wanted to ask him. "In my past, Kevin, did you ever consider any other way to save the company?" He looked startled, as if the thought had genuinely never occurred to him. I understood. Then, I crumpled the ultrasound report and tossed it into the nearby trash can. "I understand. I'll go." I stood to leave, but Kevin called out to me. I turned around only to see him offering me an awkward, forced smile. "It's nothing. Thanks for your help." I nodded, then walked out of his study. Sam is notorious for being cruel. If she goes there, she might not even come back alive. The maid's idle gossip drifted into my ears, making me pause mid-step. Yeah, and she's pregnant too. If she really goes, who knows what kind of torture she'll face, especially since that young master is in a wheelchair. They say his bad legs made his temper even worse. Even the housemates could feel sorry for me. But Kevin, my husband of 5 years, who had shared my bad and my life, didn't bat an eye as he pushed me into the abyss. When I opened the bedroom door, Sandra, the woman who had cared for me since I was a child, looked at me with concern etched across her face. She took my cold hands in hers. "Ruby, why don't you beg Kevin? He's always been good to you. Maybe he'll change his mind." But all I could see was Kevin's twisted face. From my past life, the way he had pressed the blanket down on our child's face, ignoring her cries. I could still remember the pain and terror. When that knife pierced my body, I gently patted Sandra's hand, my tone indifferent. "It's useless. No one knows how ruthless he can be better than I do." Chapter 2. I had once believed that Kevin and I were in love. In my past life, when Sam's contract first arrived at our home, Kevin's face flushed with anger. He ranted about how Sam was trying to humiliate him, and swore he would never send his wife away in exchange for his own future. But when the company's financial reports and pressure from the board fell squarely on Kevin's shoulders, he had no choice but to sign that contract. When I found out 5 months pregnant, I cried and begged him, even threatening to take my life, along with our unborn child. Only then did Kevin reluctantly find another girl. to send to Sam's bed. But within a month, news of Bianca's death reached the E family. Kevin snapped the pen he was holding in half, then calmly arranged for her funeral. After that, life returned to normal. Or at least that's how it seemed. He accompanied me to my prenatal checkups. Even cooked bird's nest soup for me himself. When my water broke and I was rushed to the hospital, he stood outside the delivery room, the picture of a devoted husband and expectant father. He had even booked me into the best postpartum recovery center. But on the day I brought our child home, he had the family doctor inject me with a muscle relaxant. I could only watch, helpless as he suffocated our baby with a blanket. I cried, screamed, and begged him to stop, but his eyes were bloodshot, filled with the twisted satisfaction of revenge. Only when the baby's cries faded to silence did he take the gleaming fruit knife from the table and drive it into my chest. It was then that I understood. Everything before had been a facade. The one he truly loved was Bianca. So when Sam's assistant brought that contract to him, again yesterday, just like in my previous life, and Kevin signed it without hesitation, I realized he had also been reborn. This time, he would go to any lengths to protect Bianca and send me away. Sandra's eyes were red as she tried to comfort me, but I just shook my head and reassured her it's okay. It's just jumping from one fire pit into another. It can't be any worse than staying by Kevin's side. After sending Sandra out, I learned from the butler that Kevin wasn't home. He had gone to the company, or so they said. But I knew better. He had gone to see Bianca. I was the obstacle standing between him and Bianca. This time, he had effortlessly sent me off to Sam's side. And now, he could rush into Bianca's arms without hesitation. Kevin didn't come back that night, but I had already made an appointment with the obstetrician. When the doctor heard that I wanted to have an abortion, she froze for a long moment, her face filled with shock as she repeatedly asked me, again and again, "Ma'am, are you sure the baby is healthy and fully formed now?" I lowered my head and looked at the ultrasound image of the fully developed baby. Still, I nodded without hesitation. "Please, doctor, schedule the procedure as soon as possible." Seeing my firm resolve, the doctor didn't press me further. She scheduled the procedure for 3 days later, but continued to confirm my decision. Before handing me the consent form, "Are you absolutely sure you want to terminate this pregnancy?" she asked. Twice more. Without a moment's hesitation, I signed my name on the form, Chapter 3. When I walked out of the clinic, I saw Kevin sitting cautiously next to Bianca, his arm wrapped protectively around her, as they waited for their turn. The moment Bianca saw me, she instinctively hid behind Kevin. But I didn't miss the flicker of guilt in his eyes. I didn't approach them. I simply acted as if I didn't know them, and turned around to leave. I heard Kevin call my name, overlapping with the nurse, calling Bianca into the exam room. But I didn't stop, and Kevin didn't come after me either. When Kevin returned home, I was sitting at the dining table, sipping on my bowl of bird's nest soup. He cautiously led Bianca inside, holding her hand as though she were made of porcelain. I looked up briefly, then lowered my gaze and finished the last of my soup. "Ruby, this is Bianca," Kevin said stiffly, as if introducing her was a burden. His words were bare, lacking any warmth or embellishment. I wiped my mouth, tossed the wet napkin onto my plate, and nodded calmly. My indifference seemed to give Kevin some courage. He let go of Bianca's hand and slid his arm around her waist instead. "Bianca is pregnant with my child. Since you'll be moving into Sam's house in a few days, why don't you go ahead and move your things into the room next door?" My eyes flicked to Bianca's belly, already showing at about 6 months. So, all those business trips Kevin had taken were really just time spent tangled in her sheets. "Sure, you can have someone move my things to the other room," I replied without hesitation. Kevin, however, seemed displeased by my lack of resistance. His face darkened. Ruby, what's that supposed to mean? I chuckled lightly. Isn't this what you wanted? I'm simply giving you what you asked for. Kevin's expression hardened. As he stepped in front of Bianca protectively, I waved dismissively and gave him a small smile. Relax. I'm not going to hurt your precious darling. I'm not that bored. I turned and went upstairs, leaving Kevin and Bianca staring at each other in confusion. I heard Bianca whisper to him, asking why I wasn't angry. In my past life, Kevin had played the role of the devoted husband. Perfectly, he pretended to be reluctant, making it seem like he had no choice but to send me to Sam to save our family's fortune. When he brought Bianca to meet me, he spun a story about how her late husband had died in a car accident, leaving her and her unborn child vulnerable. She volunteered. Kevin had assured me back then, wrapping his arms around me and pressing a kiss to my forehead. Her husband's family was kind to us. Don't worry, Ruby, she's doing this willingly. But that willingness led Bianca to her death, along with her unborn child. Before I died, Kevin had stood over me with bloodshot eyes, confessing through clenched teeth that Bianca's baby had been his. He claimed that I and my child had to atone for the deaths of Bianca and her baby. Chapter 4. I moved into the slightly smaller room next door, while Bianca acted as if she were the true mistress of the house. Sandra, as usual, visited me on behalf of my grandfather. When the bird's nest soup she had cooked for me was intercepted by Bianca, she stormed to my room and gave Bianca a thorough hands on her hips. That's when Kevin came home. He looked from Bianca, sobbing prettily on the bed, to Sandra standing in the doorway, and the veins on his forehead bulged with anger. He raised his hand to slap Sandra, but my cold voice interrupted him. Heaven. My grandfather treats Sandra like his own daughter. If you lay a hand on her and my grandfather finds out, do you think your company will survive long enough to get that land from Sam? Kevin's fist clenched at his side, shaking with suppressed rage. In just a few strides, he reached Bianca and began comforting her, while growling under his breath. Get out. I took Sandra's arm and had her accompany me to get the abortion done. Instead of returning to Kevin's house, I went to Yushui Garden. Sam and Kevin's contract had become the talk of the city, but my grandfather remained surprisingly quiet. As Sandra handed me a bowl of soup, his gaze dropped briefly to my now flat stomach. If it hadn't been for your insistence back then, I never would have allowed you to marry Kevin. I guess things are finally being set right. His words caught me off guard. What did he mean by set right? He said nothing more, only urging me to rest and recover. I didn't return to Kevin's house until 3 days later. Kevin didn't even notice that my belly had flattened. Instead, he tossed a document onto the table in front of me. I picked it up, and the large bold letters at the top read, Divorce Agreement. Sam insists that I divorce you. Before he'll honor the contract, when I didn't respond, Kevin softened his tone. Ruby, this is just temporary. Once I've secured the land and Shiching, I'll bring you back from Sam's house, and we can remarry. Okay. I looked at his fake sincerity and internally scoffed, without saying a word. I flipped to the last page and quickly signed my name, Ruby, in the designated space for the wife's signature. As I handed him the signed document, I didn't miss the flicker of smug satisfaction and cunning in his eyes. After our divorce was finalized, Bianca became even more brazen in her provocations. But my love for Kevin had died long ago, and her antics were nothing more than the desperate performances of a clown in my eyes. Still, she enjoyed pushing her luck. One day she had all my beloved camellias and roses uprooted from the garden and replaced with her favorite roses. I merely sat in the yard sipping tea, watching her bark orders to the gardeners under the shade of the trees. But she crossed the line when she sneaked into my room and stole the jade bracelet my mother had left me. I grabbed her wrists tightly, my voice low. And Bianca, I'll only say this once. Take off the bracelet and give it back to me. Chapter 5. Her gaze lingered behind me, before a malicious grin spread across her face. Suddenly, she collapsed downward, struggling as she fell. Ruby, what do you think Kevin will do to you if I say? You pushed me. She let out a piercing scream. I heard those all too familiar footsteps. And sure enough, Kevin arrived just in time to catch her in his arms. Bianca sobbed, clinging to him like a fragile flower. Kevin, don't be mad at Ruby. She's just upset that I'm carrying your baby. She's jealous that I'm going to be the new Mrs. Kevin. Watching her pitiful performance, I couldn't help but laugh internally. What a second-rate actress. But Kevin, captivated by his weeping lover, couldn't care less about logic. Without warning, he raised his hand and slapped me across the face, with full force. My cheek burned and my ear rang with a sharp buzz. Fury boiled within me. I glared at this despicable couple and, without a second thought, raised my hand and slapped them both back. Ruby Kevin's face twisted in anger, and he lifted his hand again to hit me. But before he could, I grabbed the fruit knife from the table and pointed it straight at him. Kevin froze in place, his hand suspended. Midair, Kevin. I don't care whose child your little lover is carrying. As for the title of Mrs. Kevin, whoever wants it can have it. But the jade bracelet on your mistress's wrist belongs to my mother. And if you, too, don't give it back, I have no problem making her, and that bastard in her womb, pay for it with their lives. Kevin's gaze darted to the exquisite jade bracelet, adorning Bianca's left wrist. Bianca continued to cry, clinging to Kevin and begging to keep the bracelet. Kevin seemed to soften, opening his mouth to say something to me. But before he could, I pressed the fruit knife against my neck, the blade biting into my skin. Tell me, if Sam's people arrive tomorrow and find my dead body instead of me, do you think he'll still hand over that land in the West City, as outlined in the contract? Kevin didn't respond, but I saw the violent fury in his eyes begin to waver. Bianca, however, still refused to let go of the bracelet. It wasn't until she saw the blade of the knife stained with my blood that Kevin panicked. His hands trembled as he personally removed the bracelet from Bianca's wrist and handed it to me. See, Kevin loved nothing and no one, only power and wealth. I carefully put the jade bracelet away. Kevin sighed in relief and quickly called for someone to tend to the wound on my neck. As Kevin escorted Bianca upstairs, she passed by me and shot me a vicious glare. Ruby, when Sam tortures you to death, I'll be sure to convince Kevin to collect your body. I let out a cold chuckle. We'll see who collects whose body first. Because in my past life, when I died, that ruthless and infamous heir, Sam turned red-eyed when he heard of my death. He showed up at my funeral with his men and buried me in his family's ancestral tomb. Then he personally ensured Kevin rotted in prison. I still remember how Sam cradled my bone-white urn, his eyes brimming with pain as he muttered, "Ruby, I came too late." Chapter 6. I didn't know why Sam would be interested in me, or what connection we shared. But compared to Sam, it was Kevin, the scum of the earth, who terrified me the most. When Sam's car pulled up to the front of the house, Kevin held my hand tightly, putting on a show with tears streaming down his face, playing the role of a heartbroken, devoted husband. I frowned, trying to pull my hand away, but he held on with a death grip. The window of the Rolls-Royce rolled down, revealing Sam's sharp, chiseled face. His expression was cold, his aura indifferent and commanding. He adjusted the gold-rimmed glasses, perched on his prominent nose, and glanced down at the diamond-encrusted Patek Philippe on his wrist, his tone laced with impatience. "Kevin, there's no audience here. You can drop the act. No one's handing you an Oscar." Kevin, who had been wailing like a desperate man, stopped abruptly. His eyes narrowed, and the tears that had been flowing earlier had completely disappeared. Exposed by Sam. A glimmer of hatred flashed across Kevin's gaze. Sam's driver opened the door for me. As I stepped toward the car, Kevin grabbed my wrist, pulling me close to whisper in my ear, "Ruby, when you die, I'll be the one to collect your body. And when you're gone, I'll take good care of your family's wealth." I laughed, shaking off his hand, and met his gaze, amusement sparkling in my eyes as I chuckled. "Oh, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed." I climbed into the car, leaving Kevin standing there dumbfounded. As the window slowly rolled up, his face gradually disappeared from my view. When we arrived at Sam's home, his driver opened the car door for me. I watched Sam being helped into his wheelchair, a strange and unexplainable emotion stirring in my. "You didn't have to personally come pick me up today." Sam looked up at me, his lips parting slightly, as if he had something to say. But in the end, he remained silent. "Let's go," he said softly. As soon as we entered the house, a girl a few years younger than me rushed forward and hugged me tightly, her voice trembling. "Ruby, my brother finally brought you here." I gently patted her back, but as I looked at her face, a memory from years ago suddenly clicked into place. When I was 10, during a visit to my grandmother's house, I had saved 2 children from being kidnapped. They stayed with me at my grandmother's house for almost a month before their family came to take them home. Before leaving, the little boy had held his sister's hand, tears brimming in his eyes as he promised, "Don't worry, one day I'll come find you." Over time, those 2 children had faded into the depths of my memory. I fell in love with Kevin, became his wife, and forgot all about that month when I had saved Sam and his little sister, and how he had spent every day running around and playing by my side. Chapter 7. When Sam and I last parted ways. He was still perfectly healthy. Why was he now confined to a wheelchair? As I gently patted the sobbing Lisa on the back, my gaze couldn't help but flicker toward Sam's legs. "All right, Lisa," Sam said softly. "Ruby just got back. Take her upstairs to rest." I had a million questions I wanted to ask him, but I knew now wasn't the time. Lisa wiped away her tears and held my hand as she led me upstairs. She told me my room was right next to hers, and that I could come to her any time if I needed anything. She glanced at the small white suitcase standing by the door. "Ruby, is that all the stuff you brought with you?" I nodded. Everything I had left at Kevin's house carried traces of him, and just looking at those items made me feel sick. Since fate had granted me a second chance, I would make sure Kevin and I were completely untangled. Lisa beamed and led me into the walk-in closet. The shelves were filled to the brim with designer clothes for every season, from lingerie to outerwear. Shoes, bags, and jewelry covered an entire wall. "I wasn't sure what style you liked," Lisa said with a bright smile, "so I took the liberty of picking out a variety for you."